The girl walked barefoot through the ash-strewn trail, her lavender dress torn at the hem and soaked from the morning mist. Each step stirred the cold dust, and behind her, nothing followed. No wagon, no shadow, no kin. Just silence thick as wool. She was 18, and already spoken of like a ghost. The town of Grafton sat hunched at the edge of the plains, its buildings weathered, leaning, as if they too had grown tired of standing. As she entered, heads turned, not out of curiosity, but calculation. A merchant shifted his apron, a woman pulled her child behind her, and the whispers began before her feet stopped. "That's the Barren girl," someone murmured. "She's the one her uncle traded for 2 sacks of seed." "Didn't even bleed proper," they said. The girl, Calla, kept her gaze on the ground. Her hands clutched the ribbon her cousin had given her, the last bright thing she owned. It fluttered in the breeze like something alive. She tucked it into her bodice and stepped toward the well. Water sloshed as she drew the bucket up, arms trembling. Her reflection rippled in the surface. Skin too pale from hunger, hair tangled with soot, eyes dulled from the weight of looking down too long. She didn't expect kindness. She only hoped not to be chased off. Behind her, boots thudded, slow, deliberate. She turned. The man stood tall, broad-shouldered, sun-beaten, with dark hair curling at the collar and a beard that shadowed his jaw like rust. His shirt was worn but clean, suspenders taut against his chest. He didn't smile, didn't sneer, just looked. Boaz Granger had spoken fewer words in 5 years than most men did in a week. But when he did speak, it was plain and it held. Folks listened, even when they didn't want to. Now, he looked at Calla like she was something he hadn't expected, but maybe needed. "I need a wife," he said. The bucket slipped in her hand and hit the stones. Water splashed her skirts. Her breath caught, throat tight with something between fear and disbelief. "You need strong sons." The square went quiet. A dog barked once, far off. Calla stood frozen, heart hammering, unsure whether to run or speak or collapse where she stood. Boaz didn't move. Just tipped his hat, the brim shadowing his eyes, and turned away. That night, she slept behind the blacksmith's shed, curled into herself like a question unanswered. Rain soaked the hem of her dress again. The ribbon, still tucked near her heart, was the only dry thing she owned. At dawn, she woke to the sound of hoofbeats and hammering and more whispers. Miss Temperance, the preacher's widow and self-appointed voice of God, was already standing on her porch, cup of chicory in one hand, tongue sharp as barbed wire. "Some girls come to town wearing shame like perfume," she said to no one and everyone. Calla passed her quietly, head down. "She's cursed," said a boy. "My pa said so. She'll poison a field just by stepping in it." At the creek, she knelt and scrubbed the dirt from her dress. Her fingers were raw, but she didn't stop. In the folds of her bodice, she found the note again, folded so small it might have been a leaf. Her cousin's handwriting, shaky but sure. "You're not broken. Just not theirs." She blinked hard. The water blurred. The tin of cornbread sat nearby on the rocks. Still warm. Wrapped in burlap. No note, no name. She looked up and saw Boaz Granger walking away down the ridge, coat flaring behind him, not once looking back. By mid-afternoon, Calla sat near the fence post at the edge of Granger's land. Her boots had split open at the sole, so she'd taken them off. Her feet were blistered, but she didn't mind the dirt. Dirt didn't talk. She didn't know why she'd come. Only that his voice hadn't felt cruel. It had landed different. Not heavy, just steady. The sun dipped behind a bank of clouds, casting the ranch in gray gold. The barn door creaked open, and there he was again, axe in hand, shirt rolled to the elbows. His arms bore old scars, the kind that don't fade but don't define either. He saw her. Said nothing. Calla stood. Her voice barely left her lips. "You said wife." He nodded once. "You said sons." Another nod. No smile. No gesture. Just presence. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "I don't expect nothing from you," he said. "Not tonight. Not ever, unless you want it." The wind stirred the ribbon in her dress. He stepped aside, barn door wide open. Inside, it smelled of cedar and dust and something warm cooking. A blue quilt had been laid over hay, with a pillow that looked used, but soft. A stew pot sat on the stove nearby, and a dog lifted its head at her, then went back to sleep. She paused. "No lock on the door," Boaz said, voice steady. "You leave when you want." She stepped inside. The barn was warmer than any place she'd been in months. The stew filled her nose, but she didn't reach for it. Instead, she sat by the dog and curled her knees to her chest. He watched her a moment longer, then pulled the door almost closed, but not fully. She slept that night without dreams. The storm passed. The silence didn't feel cruel anymore. By morning, Boaz was out chopping wood. She opened the barn door and stepped into the morning fog, quilt still wrapped around her. She walked barefoot across the cold soil, tin cup in her hand. Filled it at the well. Walked to him. He paused mid-swing. She held it out. He took it. Drank slow. His hands, thick and calloused, didn't tremble. When he handed it back, their fingers brushed, just once. Then, without asking, he handed her the smaller axe leaning nearby. Not as a challenge. As if to say, if you want a place here, here's a way to help shape it. She gripped the handle. It was heavier than she thought. But she raised it and brought it down. The log didn't split. She tried again. This time, it cracked. Boaz turned back to his own task. Neither said a word. Behind them, the town still whispered. But out here, there was only the sound of wood breaking and a ribbon in the breeze. Later that afternoon, Miss Temperance stormed into the sheriff's office. "She's moved in with him," the woman snapped. "Without God. Without vows. Without right." Sheriff Durney barely looked up. Boaz don't need a preacher to tell him what's his. Not with hands like his. The town kept its tongue sharp, but no one came knocking. That night, as Calla sat on the barn's porch step watching the stars peek through, Boaz set down a bowl of stew beside her and sat beside her in silence. She didn't look at him. But she didn't move away. For the first time, when she looked down at her hands, she didn't see absence. She saw skin toughening. A place to hold something. Boaz stood, walking back toward the fields. He paused once, halfway to the fence. Didn't turn. Just spoke over his shoulder. "You'll have your name back," Calla rose. "And no one'll say it's soft like pity again." Then he kept walking. She sat still, hands around the bowl. And though she hadn't meant to, she whispered his name once. "Boaz." He didn't stop. But she knew he heard it. Because this time, the barn door closed. But it didn't shut. Which city are you watching our video from? Please leave a comment. Please subscribe to the channel as well. Thank you.